The toughest skill is learning to smile while you're being erased. I've been perfecting that smile for 2 decades. I smiled when my sister Chloe received a trip to Europe for her high school graduation, while I got a gift certificate to a bookstore. And I smiled just last night over dinner. It was a Tuesday. My mother slid a crisp, cream-colored envelope across the polished wood of the dining table. 15,000, darling, she said to Chloe. A little something for the new house fund. I watched my sister's face light up as she opened it, and I felt that familiar, icy numbness creep into my chest. A moment later, my father turned to me. His steak-laden fork paused midway to his mouth. "Still wrangling those tenants, Becca?" he asked. It wasn't meant to be cruel. He was simply oblivious. "Maybe you should look into getting a nicer rental for yourself one of these days." "I'm on it," I lied, my voice even and calm. Before we get into the whole story, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I just smiled and nodded, but beneath the table, my hands were balled into fists so tight my knuckles ached. They were already sore from signing my name over and over for nearly 2 solid hours that afternoon. They saw their quiet, sensible, safe daughter. They had absolutely no idea that I had just liquidated my entire life savings, gambled every cent I had on a single deed, and lit a fuse they wouldn't even notice until the resulting fire was too massive to ever be ignored. Becoming the overlooked child isn't a sudden event. It's not one big dramatic scene. It's a slow fade into the background. It's 1,000 tiny paper cuts that teach you to be quiet. You learn to lower your voice because it just seems to bounce off the walls of the space they don't make for you. You learn to beam while someone else takes a bow because that smile is the only prize you're going to get. You learn to be the low-maintenance one, the sensible one, the one who never needs a thing. My whole identity was constructed from that lesson. I was the brunette daughter with the quiet eyes. My sister Chloe was the blonde with the loud, infectious laugh. She was the one they watched. I was the one who matched the wallpaper. When I was 13, I dedicated 4 months to a state science competition. My project was a fully functional robotic arm built from scratch with scavenged parts and complex circuits. I soldered every single wire myself. I spent all my allowance on servos and microcontrollers. I built it in the corner of our dusty basement, entirely alone. When I won first place in the entire state, I brought the huge blue ribbon home and laid it on the kitchen island while my mother was prepping dinner. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said, her back to me as she chopped onions. "What's that for?" "My project," I said. "I won first place." "That's wonderful." She never turned around. When Dad came home, I showed him. He glanced at the ribbon, then at the box containing my creation. "Well," he said, tapping the plastic casing of the arm, "at least we know you're handy." That's a very useful skill. Handy. That's what he called it. Like I'd just assembled a piece of IKEA furniture, not engineered a working robotic limb. 2 months later, Chloe participated in a regional debate tournament. She came in 3rd. She didn't win. She placed. That weekend, they hosted a celebratory barbecue for her. Dad bought her a brand new laptop for all her hard work. Mom took her on a shopping spree that summer to celebrate her major achievement. I watched her unbox the shiny new laptop, and I felt that cold, familiar silence settle deep in my gut. I went down to the basement and stared at my blue ribbon, which I had pinned to the corkboard. It looked insignificant. It looked childish. That was the day I understood the fundamental rule. My accomplishments were crafts. Chloe's were achievements. My hard work was useful. Hers was a sign of talent. This exact pattern shadowed us for our entire lives. When college applications came around, I buried myself in books. I earned a full academic scholarship to the state university. I was incandescently proud. This, I thought, this they have to see. This is real money. This is a real, undeniable achievement. I sat them down in the living room to tell them. I got a full ride, I announced. It covers all tuition and fees for all 4 years. My father nodded slowly, a look of distinct relief washing over his face. That's very sensible, Becca, he said. Extremely smart. That saves us a bundle. Good girl. Saves us a bundle. That was my achievement. A year later, Chloe applied to a prestigious private design school in New York. The tuition was $50,000 a year. She wanted to study graphic design. She was accepted, but with zero financial aid. I overheard my parents having tense, whispered arguments in their bedroom for a week. Then, they made the announcement at dinner. "We're going to make it work," Dad declared, raising his glass of iced tea. "You have to follow your dream, Chloe. We'll support you." I sat there, methodically cutting my pork chop. My sensible scholarship wasn't about my dream. It was about their budget. Chloe's expensive, impractical dream was something they would sacrifice everything for. They took out a second mortgage on our home to pay for it. For her dream. No one ever once asked me what my dream was. I don't think it ever occurred to them that I might have one. I was just the sensible one, the one who was handy. After I graduated, I found a job as a leasing agent for a large property management company. I was diligent. I learned to de-escalate conflicts with furious tenants. I learned budget management, maintenance scheduling, and how to read a 40-page lease agreement like it was a bedtime story. Within 2 years, I was promoted to senior property manager. At 24, I was overseeing a 400-unit building. I told them about my promotion. My mother smiled. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful. Does it come with a good retirement plan?" Dad nodded in approval. "Property manager. That's a good, steady career. People will always need a roof over their heads." A steady career. Meanwhile, Chloe, who had dropped out of design school after 2 years, landed a job creating logos for a local startup. "She just has such a visionary eye," Mom would gush to her friends on the phone. "She's in marketing now. She's just so creative." That was the rhythm of my life. Their praise was a concert, and my name was never on the program. I was the stagehand, working in the shadows, making sure all the lights stayed on. Chloe was the star, basking in the spotlight. And my parents were in the front row, throwing bouquets of roses at her feet. So when I decided I was going to buy a building, I knew with a certainty that reached my bones that I could never, ever tell them. If I told them, my father would call it reckless. He'd tell me I was getting in way over my head. My mother would fret about whether it was safe. They would find a way to shrink my dream. They would find a way to shrink me. I had been shrinking for them my entire life. I was done being small. My secret wasn't about deceit. It was about self-preservation. It was about building one thing, just one single thing, that they couldn't touch with their criticism, couldn't diminish with their faint praise, couldn't dismiss with their obliviousness. I was going to build it in absolute silence, and that silence was my power. They handed Chloe $15,000 for her granite countertops. My own savings account was the product of 3 years of relentless, invisible labor. I didn't have their financial backing. I didn't have anyone's help at all, but I had discipline. I had a laser focus that sometimes even scared me. My investment fund, which I had named Escape, started with $52. It was the leftover cash from my grocery budget one month. For 3 years, that account was my only religion. Instant noodle dinners weren't a meme, they were my reality. While Chloe was posting photos of $18 craft cocktails with her friends, I was at home timing the boil of my water. I became a master of couponing. I bought all my clothes from thrift stores. My 2012 sedan had a spiderweb crack in the windshield that I had just trained my eyes to look past. My best friend Sarah would call me on Friday nights. "Come on, Becca. Just one drink. The whole gang is going out." "I can't," I'd say, my eyes glued to the spreadsheet on my old laptop. "I'm saving up for something." "What is it? A new car? A trip to Hawaii?" "Something like that," I'd lie. I couldn't even tell her. The dream felt too fragile. Saying it out loud felt like it would shatter it. It was profoundly lonely. There were countless nights I just wanted to give in, to buy a new pair of boots, to go on a proper date with my boyfriend Liam, to a restaurant that didn't have a value menu. Liam was the only one who had an inkling of what I was doing. He was a quiet, kind man who taught high school history. He knew I was saving obsessively, but he didn't grasp the scale of it. "You work so hard, Becca," he'd say, rubbing the tension from my shoulders while I hunched over my laptop at 1 a.m. "What are you always poring over?" "Just work stuff," I'd mumble. It wasn't work stuff. It was my real education. I didn't just hoard money, I studied. While my family was watching sitcoms, I was taking online courses in real estate finance. I devoured books on property law. I taught myself about depreciation, amortization schedules, and cash-on-cash returns. I learned the difference between a good investment and a money pit. I learned that peeling paint terrified most buyers, but it was an easy, cheap fix. I learned that a cracked foundation was a black hole that would devour all your money and your soul. As a property manager, I had a secret weapon. I knew the real costs. I knew exactly what it cost to replace a water heater. I knew the going rate for a licensed plumber per hour. I knew which types of tenants always paid on time and which ones you'd have to hound. My father saw my job as a safe, dead-end career. I saw it as a paid internship. I was getting paid to learn how to be a landlord. After 3 years of living like a phantom, I logged into my escape account. My vision blurred. The number on the screen read $25,100. I had done it. That's when the real hunt began. I spent my nights scouring real estate websites. I wasn't looking for a home for myself. I didn't care about granite countertops or walk-in closets. I was looking for numbers that made sense. The duplex on Elm Street appeared on a Tuesday. It was hideous. The listing photos were grainy and dark. The description was a single curt sentence. 2 units, needs, TLC. That was why it was cheap. $95,000. I drove there during my lunch break. The neighborhood was older, filled with working-class families and tidy little houses. The duplex was covered in faded, peeling yellow paint. The front porch had a noticeable sag. But I walked around the back and checked the foundation. Solid brick. I peered up at the roof. The shingles were old, but they weren't curling. I looked at the side of the house. 2 separate electrical meters. Perfect. I went back to my office and ran the numbers. I ran them again and again until I could recite them in my sleep. Purchase price, $95,000. My down payment, 20%, would be $19,000. My total savings were $25,100. That left me with just over $6,000 for closing costs and immediate repairs. It was tight. It was terrifyingly tight. I called the listing agent. I'd like to see the units. 1 unit was vacant. It was a disaster. The carpets were stained, and the kitchen had a lingering smell of old grease. The other unit was occupied by a long-term tenant named Elena. She paid $750 a month. The agent mentioned she was never late, so $750 from Elena. The vacant unit, once I cleaned it up and put in new flooring, could easily fetch another $750. Total potential rent, $1,500 a month. My mortgage, including property taxes and insurance, would be around $800 a month. That left a gross profit of $700. I budgeted $200 for maintenance and repairs, $150 for future capital expenditures like that roof, and $100 for a vacancy fund, just in case a unit sat empty. My net profit, my passive income, would be $250 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a beginning. It was $250 a month that I didn't have to trade my time for. It was a machine. That night, I called my bank and got a pre-approval letter. I called the real estate agent, Jessica Stone. She sounded audibly surprised when I told her I wanted to make an offer. "You're a first-time buyer?" she asked, her voice laced with skepticism. "Yes," I said, "but I'm not a first-time manager. I know exactly what I'm doing. I drafted the offer myself, $92,000. I paused. I offered $92,000 with my 20% down. My hand was trembling so violently I could barely control the mouse. This was every dollar I had. Every late night, every "no, I can't go out." All of it riding on this one single bet. My father's voice echoed in my head. "It's risky, Becca. You're just a manager. What do you really know about owning?" I squeezed my eyes shut. I pictured the $15,000 check for Chloe. I pictured my state championship ribbon in the basement. I opened my eyes. I attached the pre-approval letter. I clicked send. The whoosh of the email departing my outbox was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I leaned back in my chair, in the darkness of my cheap apartment. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Let's do this," I whispered to the empty room. The next few weeks were a unique form of hell. The seller countered at $93,500. I accepted. Then came the underwriting process. The bank wanted everything. Where did this $25,000 come from? The loan officer asked me over the phone, his voice flat and bored. "I saved it," I said. "You saved it? From your salary?" He sounded as if he didn't believe a word I was saying. "Yes, I have the bank statements, 3 years of them. I had to send every single one. 3 years of my small, disciplined, uneventful life laid bare. 3 years of $300 here, $450 there. When he finally gave his approval, he said, "Well, you're certainly very frugal." He said frugal, but his tone clearly meant weird. On closing day, I woke up hours before my alarm. I couldn't stomach any food. I put on my one nice blouse, the one I'd found at a consignment shop, and drove to the title office. The office smelled of stale coffee and old paper. It was a drab, windowless room. The closing agent was a woman who seemed allergic to smiling. The seller was an elderly man who looked tired and sad to be letting the property go. My agent, Jessica, was there, radiating cheerfulness. I was the youngest person in that room by at least 2 decades. "Okay, Rebecca," the closing agent said, "we're going to start the signing." She pushed a stack of paper toward me that was at least 3 inches thick. My hand started to cramp before I even began. I signed my name. I signed it again and again. I signed papers stating I understood my monthly payments. I signed papers stating I understood my interest rate. I signed papers stating I understood I could lose the entire property if I failed. With every signature, my father's voice grew louder in my head. It's a lot of responsibility. You're getting in over your head. Then came the moment for the check. I had gone to the bank that morning and had them cut a cashier's check for my down payment and closing costs. My entire savings gone, all of it. I slid the check across the table. The tired old man took it. The closing agent stamped a final document with a satisfying thud. She looked up at me, and for the first time she smiled. It was a small, genuine smile. "Congratulations, Miss Hale," she said. "You're now a property owner." Miss Hale, not Becca, not Honey, Miss Hale. I think I forgot how to breathe. The seller handed me a single old-fashioned brass key. Jessica, my agent, clapped her hands. "You did it." I just nodded, unable to speak. I walked out of that office into the blindingly bright sunlight. The world looked different. The colors of the trees seemed more vivid. I got into my old sedan and just sat there for a full minute, holding the key in my hand. It was still warm from the seller's grasp. I drove straight to the duplex, my duplex. I parked at the curb and just stared at it. The peeling yellow paint, the overgrown bushes in the front yard, the slightly crooked porch. It was ugly, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I got out of the car and took out my phone. I stood there on the sidewalk and took a picture. In the photo, I'm just a tired-looking woman with frizzy hair from the humidity. I'm not really smiling. It's more of a look of stunned disbelief. But I'm holding up the key. I opened my phone to the family group chat. It was the first thing on my screen. The last message was from Chloe, a picture of her new, expensive espresso machine. My thumb hovered over the attach photo button. I could send it. I could write, "Guess what I just did?" I could almost hear their replies. My mom, "Oh, Becca, that neighborhood looks a bit rough. Is it safe?" My dad, "A duplex? That's a lot of work. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Did you have it inspected?" Chloe, "Ugh, that color. They wouldn't see the victory. They would only see the risk. They wouldn't see the numbers that worked. They would only see the peeling paint." I closed the app. I put the phone back in my pocket. This victory was mine, and mine alone. I walked up the porch steps, put the key in the lock, and opened the door to the vacant unit. The smell of old grease and musty carpet hit me. I smiled. I spent an hour just walking through the empty rooms, making a mental list. New paint, new flooring, new faucets, new light fixtures. As I was leaving, the tenant from the other unit, Elena, came out onto her side of the porch. She was an older woman with a kind, weary face. "Hello," she said, her expression wary. "The agent said the house was sold." "Hi," I said, walking over. "I'm Rebecca Hale. I'm the new owner." She looked me up and down. I was in my cheap blouse, and I probably had a smudge of dirt on my face already. "You're the new landlord?" she asked. "I am," I said, "but you can just call me Rebecca." She hesitated for a moment. "The sink in my bathroom," she said, as if she were testing me. "It's been dripping for 6 months. The last owner, he kept saying he'd fix it. He never did." I nodded. "Let me see." She let me into her apartment. It was tidy and cozy. The bathroom sink was dripping. Drip, drip, drip. A steady, maddening sound. "Okay," I said, "I'll be right back." I went out to my car. My dad's voice was in my head again. Handy. He meant it as a small thing, a little hobby. I opened my trunk and pulled out my own heavy-duty toolbox. I had bought it piece by piece over the last year. I went back inside. Elena's eyes widened when she saw the toolbox. You're going to fix it?" "Yes," I got down on my knees, laying on the cold tile floor, my nice blouse getting grimy. I got out the wrench, shut off the water supply, and took the faucet handle apart. The washer inside was completely disintegrated. I had a small case of assorted washers in my kit. I found one that matched, replaced it, and put the whole thing back together. I turned the water back on. Silence, not a single drip. I stood up, wiping grease and grime on my pants. Elena was just staring at me, speechless. "Thank you," she finally whispered. "Thank you, Miss Hale." "Just Rebecca," I said, smiling. I walked out of her apartment and back into my empty unit. I sat down on the stained carpet, my toolbox beside me, and in that moment I understood. I didn't just sign a stack of papers. I didn't just buy a house. When I fixed that sink, I realized the truth. I didn't just own property. I owned my future. I owned the problems, and now I owned the solutions. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was the landlord. A week later, I was covered head to toe in paint. I had spent every waking hour that I wasn't at my day job inside that vacant unit. I had ripped out the old, foul-smelling carpet myself. I had scrubbed every inch of the walls. I was in the middle of painting the entire apartment a clean, bright white. My back was in agony. My hands were cracked and dry, and I had never, ever been happier. Then my phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Sunday dinner, 6 p.m. Don't be late. We're celebrating Chloe." I had completely forgotten the celebration. Chloe had officially moved into her new house, the one they had helped her buy. I sighed. I scrubbed my hands with a wire brush until they were raw, but the white paint was still caked under my fingernails. I put on the nicest clothes I owned that weren't covered in drywall dust and drove to my parents' house. The second I walked in the door, the noise hit me. It was always loud when Chloe was the center of attention. The house smelled like roast beef. "Becca, honey, you're late," Mom said, kissing the air next to my cheek. "Put the salad in the kitchen." I walked into the dining room. My father was opening an expensive bottle of wine. Chloe was lounging on the sofa, her feet up, holding her phone out to my aunt. "And this is the master bedroom," Chloe was saying, swiping through photos. "We're having a custom upholstered headboard made." "Oh, it's just gorgeous," my aunt cooed. I sat down at the table quietly. "Dinner!" Mom called out. We all gathered around the table. Dad poured the wine and raised his glass. "A toast," he said, beaming at my sister, "to Chloe, our little homeowner. She's got her new house, her great new job. She's really moving up in the world. We are so, so proud of you, honey." "Oh, Dad," Chloe giggled. My mother dabbed a tear from her eye. "It's just perfect, sweetie. You have such wonderful taste. That granite you chose is just stunning." Chloe passed her phone around the table like it was a holy relic. I had to look at the pictures, the 4 bedrooms, the 2-car garage, the gleaming granite counters, the huge empty backyard. It was a brand new house in a brand new suburb. It was lovely. It was also, I knew from my own research, a massive mortgage that she probably couldn't afford without our parents' constant financial help. I just smiled and nodded. "It's beautiful, Chloe. Really." My knuckles were throbbing where I'd accidentally slammed them with a hammer, trying to fix a piece of baseboard. I felt that old, familiar silence settle over me. I was the ghost at the table again. I was sitting there, an actual property owner, a landlord, an investor, and they were toasting my sister for choosing countertops. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was just so exhausted. Maybe I just wanted for one single second to be seen. I waited for a lull in the Chloe show. "It looks great, Chloe," I said, my voice sounding small even to my own ears. I've actually been thinking about buying something myself soon. My mother gave me a polite, distant smile. Oh, that's nice, dear. A little condo would be perfect for you. My father set his wine glass down. He chuckled. That same awful, dismissive chuckle. Becca, let's be realistic, he said. He leaned over and patted my shoulder. It wasn't a hug. It was a pat, the kind you give a dog. You've got a steady job and that's great. We're proud of you for that. But buying a house? It's a lot of responsibility. It's a huge financial risk. I just looked at him. I've been running the numbers. I think I can handle it. He shook his head, still smiling, as if I were a child talking about joining the circus. I just don't want you getting in over your head. You're not like your sister. Chloe's an extrovert. She's a go-getter. Then he said the words that finally broke something deep inside me. You should try to get a real career first. You're smart, Becca. You really are. You hide. He turned away, walking to the kitchen to get more wine. His dismissal was as complete as if he'd slapped me across the face. You hide. He saw my quietness. He saw my careful, meticulous planning, my late-night studying, my discipline, my sacrifice, and he called it hiding. He saw my silence as a weakness. He saw it as fear. Chloe hadn't even heard him. She was already showing my aunt pictures of potential curtains. My mother was talking about what to have for dessert. I was invisible. My own father had just told me I was a coward, and no one else at the table had even noticed. I stood up. "Excuse me," I mumbled. I went into the kitchen. I gripped the edge of the sink, the same one I had washed dishes in for my entire life. I looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. I saw my tired face. I saw the white paint still stubbornly clinging under my fingernails. I wasn't hiding. I was building. I looked at my father's reflection as he laughed in the other room. "You have no idea," I whispered to the glass. "You have no idea what I'm building." I turned away from the window. My secret was still safe. And for the first time in my life, I was deeply, profoundly glad they couldn't see me. Their applause was cheap. Their validation was worthless. My duplex was real. The paint on my hands was real. The rent check that would be in my mailbox next week was real. I took a deep breath, put on my old practice smile, and went back to the table to eat my dessert. That Sunday dinner was a turning point. When my father said I was smart, but that I hide, something inside me didn't just crack. It hardened into steel. He thought my quiet was a weakness. I would let him keep believing that. I went back to my empty, freshly painted apartment and made a vow. I would never ask them for anything again. Not for money, not for help, and certainly not for their approval. Their opinions were no longer a variable in my business plan. The work was brutal. I was a landlord before my day job started, and I was a landlord long after I was supposed to be asleep. I found my first tenant for the newly renovated unit, a young couple just starting their lives together. The day they moved in, they paid their security deposit and first month's rent. I deposited that money into my bank account, and my escape fund, which I had renamed my roof fund, wasn't empty anymore. With Elena's rent added in, the machine was on. My life fell into a simple, repeating loop. Wake up at 6 a.m. Go to my real job as a property manager from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Change clothes in my car. Go to my own property from 4 p.m. until 10 p.m. I learned to do things I never thought I was capable of. I learned how to install drywall one frustrating Saturday. The new tenants in Unit 1 had a small leak from the upstairs bathroom that left a 3-foot ugly brown stain on their living room ceiling. I could have hired a professional for $500. My roof fund glared at me and said, "Absolutely not." I watched 8 hours of YouTube tutorials. I bought a sheet of drywall, a tub of joint compound, and tape. My first attempt was a complete disaster. The compound was lumpy. The tape bubbled. I got so frustrated I punched a hole in a different part of the wall. I sat on the floor, covered in white dust, and just cried. I was so exhausted. I was so alone. I couldn't call my dad and ask him how this worked. I couldn't call Chloe to complain. I just had to sit there and figure it out myself. I took a deep breath, scraped the whole lumpy mess off, and started again and again. By Sunday night, it was okay. It wasn't perfect, but it was patched. I sanded it smooth. I painted it. When the tenants came home, they looked up and said, "Wow, that looks great, Rebecca." It didn't look great. It looked passable, but it was done. And it had cost me $40, not $500. I wasn't just handy. I was becoming strong with my hands. I memorized the local zoning codes. I learned what made a property non-conforming. I learned about easements and property lines. I learned to talk to plumbers and electricians and not to let them talk down to me. The first time an electrician tried to overcharge me for a simple job, I just stared at him in silence until he cleared his throat and gave me the real quote. Every single dollar of profit went straight into the roof fund. My $250 profit per month grew to $400 as I got my maintenance costs under control. My tenants were happy because when they called, I showed up, often within the hour with my own toolbox. They paid their rent on time. The machine kept running. 8 months after my first closing, my roof fund hit $12,000. It was time. I already knew the building I wanted. It was on Oak Avenue, 3 blocks away from my first duplex. It was another worn-down duplex, but this one had a bigger yard. The listing said, "Long-term tenants, below market rents." That was the magic phrase. It meant the owner was tired and hadn't raised the rent in years. It scared away normal home buyers, but to me it was a goldmine. The rents were $550 each. The neighborhood average was $850. The math was simple. I went to the bank. This time I had paperwork. I had profit and loss statements. I had rent rolls. I had bank statements showing consistent, predictable deposits. The loan officer, a different one this time, reviewed my file. "You bought your first property just 8 months ago?" he asked. "Yes." "And you already have $12,000 for another down payment?" "Yes." He didn't call me frugal. He approved my loan in under an hour. The second closing was different. I wore a clean blouse, but I didn't care about the smell of the coffee. I signed the stack of papers with a firm, steady hand. I knew every form. I knew exactly what I was agreeing to. The whole process took 40 minutes. I slid the check across the table, shook the seller's hand, and walked out with the keys. I now owned 4 units. Duplex 1 on Elm Street had a profit of $400 a month. Duplex 2 on Oak Avenue was a fixer-upper. I gave the existing tenants notice that I would be renovating, but that I would love for them to stay. I fixed their leaky sinks and painted their front doors. They were so grateful they agreed to a rent increase to $750. It was still below market, but they were good tenants. My new mortgage was $900. The new rent total was $1,500. My new profit was $600. My total passive income was now $1,000 a month. It was winter. I had just turned 27, and I was earning $12,000 a year from my side hustle. My day job paid me $45,000 a year. My little empire was already earning more than a quarter of my salary. I sat in my car outside the Oak Avenue duplex. It was cold, and I watched my breath fog up the glass. I had $820 in my personal checking account. I was property rich and cash poor, but I had done it. The next day, I walked into my boss's office at the property management company. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked. "Sure, Becca." "What's up?" "I'm putting in my 2 weeks' notice." He stared at me, dumbfounded. "What? Did you get another offer? We can match it. You're my best manager." "No," I said, and I smiled. It was the first truly genuine, happy smile I'd had in a year. "I'm going to work for myself. I've bought a few properties. It's time to manage my own." His jaw literally dropped. "You bought properties? Like apartment buildings?" "Just a couple of duplexes," I said. He looked at me with a completely new kind of respect. Well, I'll be damned. I walked out of that building 2 weeks later and never looked back. I was petrified. I had just quit my good, steady job. I had no health insurance. I had no 401k. I had 4 rental units and a $1,000 a month profit. I called Liam that night, my voice shaking. I did it. I quit my job. "What?" he said, his voice full of shock. "Becca, are you okay? Are you sure about this?" "I'm terrified," I said, letting out a small, shaky laugh. "But I'm okay. I'm a full-time investor now." He was silent for a moment. "You know what you're building, Becca?" he said softly. "You're building an invisible empire. No one can even see it yet, but it's real." "I know," I said, looking out my apartment window. "I call it peace." My new life had a different rhythm. It was harder, but it was all mine. My office was no longer a cubicle. It was a rickety ladder on a roof in the rain as I patched a leak. My job was learning how to tile a bathroom floor because a contractor quoted me $2,000, and I knew I could do it for $300 in materials. My job was spreadsheets, bank accounts, and constant grinding physical work. I was my own boss. I was also my own plumber, painter, accountant, and therapist. And my family still had no idea. As far as they were concerned, I was still Becca, who works with apartments. I never corrected them. When I quit my job, I just told them I'd cut back my hours to part-time. It was a lie, and it was the only way I could protect myself. Their dismissal had become a wall I could hide behind. I was running a small, growing business. I was a 27-year-old woman with a property portfolio worth over $180,000. And when I went to Sunday dinner, I was still the invisible, sensible daughter. The pattern at those dinners never changed. It just got worse. Chloe was the star. She had been promoted at her startup. She was now the senior brand experience manager. "She has such instincts," Dad said, raising his glass at the table. He said it every single time. "You just can't teach that. She just knows what people want." Chloe would soak it up. "It's honestly so stressful, Dad. We're launching a new product line, and I have to coordinate 3 different influencers. And the area rug I ordered for my living room, it's the wrong shade of cream. It's a total disaster. I had to send it back." I sat there, my hands raw and stinging under the table. My hands were stinging because I had spent the entire day before in the crawl space of the Oak Avenue duplex, fixing a broken pipe. I had mud in my hair that I hadn't been able to fully wash out. I had just saved myself $1,200 by doing the work myself, lying on my back in the cold, damp dirt. And Chloe was having a disaster over a cream-colored rug. "What about you, Becca?" Mom would ask, turning to me as an afterthought. "Still working at that building?" "Things are good, Mom," I'd say, deploying my quiet, practiced smile. "Just busy." "That's nice, honey." And she would turn right back to Chloe. "Now tell me about the curtains you were looking at." I just sat there and sipped my wine. I listened. I nodded. And inside, something new was happening. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't even hurt. It was distance. I was living in a completely different universe from them. They were worried about cream-colored rugs. I was worried about interest rates and vacancy rates. They were impressed by instincts. I was impressed by cash flow. They had no idea what I was doing because they had never, not once, asked me a real question. They never asked, "Becca, what are you passionate about?" They never asked, "What are your goals?" They never asked, "What are you building?" They just saw what they wanted to see. Chloe, the bright, shiny one, and Becca, the dull, steady one. One night, the cognitive dissonance, the gaping chasm between their world and mine, became a canyon. I was at dinner. Chloe was talking about her new boyfriend, a finance consultant. My dad was deeply impressed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. "Excuse me," I said, getting up from the table. I went to the bathroom and looked at my phone. It was Elena, my first tenant. Text, "Rebecca, the heat is out. It's so cold." Text, "Please call me. My baby is freezing." Text, "Are you coming?" My blood ran cold. It was February. It was 20 degrees outside. I ran out of the bathroom, grabbing my coat and my purse. "I have to go," I said, already walking to the door. "What?" My mother looked insulted. "We're about to have dessert." "Becca, what's wrong?" It's work," I said. "An emergency." My father sighed, a look of profound disappointment on his face. "See, Becca? This is what I mean. You're always on the clock for someone else. You let that management company walk all over you. You'll never have a real career if you're always running to fix someone else's problems." His words struck me. Fix someone else's problems. "You're right, Dad," I said, zipping up my coat. "I have to go fix a problem." I walked out the door. I didn't say goodbye. I got to Elm Street in 10 minutes. The furnace was dead. Elena and her husband were huddled in the living room with their baby, all of them bundled in coats. "I am so sorry," I said. "I'm going to fix this." I spent 4 hours in that freezing cold basement. I was on the phone with an emergency HVAC technician, a patient man who walked me through how to relight the pilot light and check the thermocouple. It turned out to be a simple $30 part. At 11 p.m., the furnace rumbled back to life. Warm air started blowing through the vents. Elena started crying with relief. She tried to pay me. "Absolutely not," I said. "I'm just so sorry it took me so long." I drove home, covered in soot and grime, shivering uncontrollably. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. Text, "I'm very disappointed in you. You were extremely rude tonight." I pulled my car over to the side of the road. I looked at the text message, and I started to laugh. I laughed until tears were streaming down my face. My family was disappointed in me for being rude, and I was out here in the freezing cold, keeping a family with a baby warm. I was no longer their daughter, not really. I was a business owner, and I had zero validation from them. For the first time, I realized I didn't need it. I didn't need it at all. My system was working. The $1,000 a month from my first 2 properties piled up faster than I had anticipated. My life was a simple loop: fix, rent, save. I was 28 years old. It had been 18 months since I'd quit my day job. With the cash flow from Elm Street and Oak Avenue, I bought my 3rd property, a small single-family house on the east side. The numbers were perfect. 6 months later, I bought my 4th, another duplex. I was now the owner of 6 units. My portfolio was worth roughly $350,000. My passive income, after all mortgages and expenses were paid, was just over $1,800 a month. It wasn't a fortune, but it was real, and it was all mine. I was still living in my same cheap apartment. I was still driving my old cracked windshield car. My empire was completely invisible to the world, and it was still completely unknown to my family. Then, on a Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. I was in the middle of painting a bedroom, with white paint in my hair. "This is Rebecca," I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear. "Hi, is this Rebecca Hale?" a professional-sounding voice asked. "Yes." "My name is Janet Chen. I'm a journalist with the Metro Business Journal." I stopped painting. "I'm sorry, who?" I assumed it was a sales call, someone trying to sell me a subscription. "Janet Chen," she repeated. "I'm a business reporter. I'm doing a story on local real estate investors, and your name came up." "My name?" I almost dropped the phone. "How?" "I track LLCs and public deed transfers," she said matter-of-factly. "An LLC named Elm and Oak Holdings has purchased 4 properties in the last 2 years. The public records list you as the sole owner. That's a very fast acquisition rate for a new investor. I wanted to hear your story." My heart was pounding in my chest. She had found me. The paper trail I had so carefully constructed wasn't invisible after all. It was a public record. "Oh," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "My story? It's not very interesting. A 28-year-old woman buying 4 properties in 2 years all by herself?" "I think it's very interesting," she said. "Could I buy you a coffee? I'd love to just hear how you did it." We met the next day at a local coffee shop. I was so nervous I spilled my coffee twice before I even took a sip. Janet was kind, a few years older than me, with a sharp, intelligent face. "So," she said, opening her notebook, "let's start at the beginning. How did you get the seed money? Big inheritance? Family money?" "Family money." I flinched. It was the very first question, and it was the one that stung the most. "No," I said, "no family money. I saved it." "You saved it?" "I saved $25,000. It took me 3 years. I worked as a property manager, and I didn't go out. I ate a lot of instant noodles." Janet stopped writing. She looked up at me. "Okay," she said slowly. "Now I'm really interested." The questions kept coming. "What was your motivation? Why real estate?" "My father, he always told me I was handy. He meant it as a small thing. And my job. I was managing properties for other people. I figured I should be managing them for myself." "So, your family was supportive?" I looked down at my hands. They were stained with paint and covered in a network of small cuts and calluses. I had been silent for my entire life. I had hidden behind my smile. And sitting there with this total stranger, I didn't want to hide anymore. "No," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "They weren't supportive. They didn't know." "What do you mean, they didn't know?" "They still don't know." Janet's pen stopped moving. "Rebecca, what are you talking about?" So I told her. I told her everything. I told her about the science fair ribbon. I told her about my sensible scholarship and Chloe's dream college. I told her about the Sunday night dinner. "They gave my sister $15,000 for her new house," I said, my voice not even shaking. It was just a fact. "That same night, my dad laughed at me. He told me I manage apartments. I don't own them. He told me to take baby steps. He had no idea I had made an offer on my first duplex that very morning." Janet was just staring at me. "So what did you do?" she asked. I just stayed silent. I bought it, then I bought another one, and another. I let them keep thinking I was just quiet, sensible Rebecca, the girl who was hiding. And they still don't know that you own 6 units, that you're a full-time investor? No, I said. As far as they know, I'm still a part-time manager at a job I quit almost 2 years ago. Janet closed her notebook. Rebecca, she said, her voice full of a new intensity, this isn't just a business story. This is an incredible story. A week later, she called me. The article is running, she said, and my editor wants to do a photo. Can we meet you at your first property, the yellow duplex? The photographer met me on Elm Street. He asked me to stand in front of that peeling yellow door, the one I had stood in front of holding my key what felt like a lifetime ago. Hold these, he said, and he handed me a set of keys from my ring. Just look right at the camera. Look proud. I was so used to hiding. I was so used to blending into the wallpaper. But I stood there. I thought about my father's dismissive laugh. I thought about my mother's anxious dismissal. I thought about the freezing cold basement and the broken furnace. I lifted my chin. I held up the keys, and I looked right into the camera lens. I didn't smile. I just existed. The next morning, the article went live. Liam sent me the link. He was the only one who knew it was coming. The headline read, How One 28-Year-Old Secretly Built a $350,000 Real Estate Empire with No Family Money. And there I was. The photo was huge. It was me standing in front of my peeling yellow door. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't hiding. I looked strong. The article told the whole story. It had my name. It had the name of my LLC, and it had the quotes. It had the $15,000 check for my sister. It had my father's "you manage, you don't own" quote. It had my answer to her question, "Did your family help you?" And my answer, printed in bold, no. They didn't even know. I sat on the floor of my cheap apartment and read my life story in the Metro Business Journal. My phone was on the carpet next to me. It was silent for about 10 seconds. And then it exploded. The first call was my mother. I stared at her name flashing on the screen. My hand was shaking. I let it go to voicemail. A second later, a text message. Mom, Rebecca, please call me right now. Is this article real? Before I could even process that, another call. Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Text, you own 4 properties? Since when? What is this article? I don't understand. Then a text from Chloe. Chloe, OMG, Becca, are you rich? Why didn't you tell me? My phone began to buzz and chime without stopping. My aunt, my uncle, my old friend, Sarah. It was as if my entire life was converging on this one single point. The invisible empire was suddenly, violently visible. I turned the phone off. I couldn't. I sat there in the sudden silence. The bomb had gone off. The secret was out. I was terrified. But I was also strangely able to breathe. The 28-year-long wait of being invisible was just gone. They could see me now. They had no choice. I left my phone off for the rest of the day. I went to my newest property, and I just painted. I put a second coat on a bedroom wall. The simple, physical labor calmed me. This was real. The paint was real. The walls were real. When I turned my phone back on that night, I had 14 missed calls and 32 text messages. The last one was from my mother. Mom, you are coming to dinner this Sunday, 6 p.m. We are not discussing this over text. We need to talk. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. The entire week was agony. I felt sick to my stomach every time I tried to eat. Liam offered to come with me. I can be there, he said, holding my hand. You don't have to face them alone. No, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice was. I have to do this alone. I started this alone. I have to finish it. That Sunday, I drove to my parents' house. It was the longest drive of my life. I walked up the same walkway and used my old key to open the same front door. I walked in. The house was silent. It was never silent. They were all there. My mom, my dad, and Chloe. They weren't in the living room. They were sitting at the dining room table, the scene of so many of my past humiliations. It looked like an intervention. My mother's eyes were red and swollen. My father just looked old. Chloe was staring at the table, her face pale. The newspaper was sitting in the middle of the table, folded to my article. My picture was facing up. I sat down in my usual chair. I didn't say anything. My dad spoke first. His voice was not the loud, confident boom I had always known. It was quiet. It was hollow. "Rebecca, why?" he asked. I just looked at him. "Why what, Dad?" "Why this?" He tapped the newspaper. "Why tell a reporter these things? About us? That we mocked you? Why didn't you just tell us?" And there it was, the question, after all this time. I took a deep breath. I did not yell, I did not cry. I just spoke the plain, simple truth. "Because you weren't listening," I said. My mother let out a small sob. "I tried to," I continued, my gaze fixed on my father. "That night, the night you gave Chloe the check, I tried to tell you I was looking at a property, and you laughed at me. You told me I manage things, I don't own them. You told me to take baby steps. You told me I was hiding. Do you remember saying that, Dad?" He stared at me. I could see the memory dawning on his face. He remembered. I did say that," he whispered. He looked down at his hands. "I did, but I thought you were stuck. I thought you were just afraid of the world. I thought you were hiding." "I wasn't hiding, Dad," I said, my voice soft. "I was working. I was saving. I was studying. You couldn't see it." He finally looked up at me, and all the pride, all the bluster was gone. He just looked broken. "You weren't stuck," he whispered, as if he were realizing it for the very first time. "You were building." My mother finally broke. She put her head in her hands and just cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs, just the quiet, awful, gasping tears of deep regret. "We're so proud of Chloe," she finally said, wiping her eyes. "She's always been so loud. She always needed so much. She was always in some kind of trouble, or she needed something. And you were just always so easy, Becca. You were so good. You were so capable. You never asked for anything." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. We stopped looking. We just assumed you were okay. We didn't see you, honey. We didn't see you at all. And I am so, so sorry." I just nodded. Then I heard from the biggest surprise, Chloe. She hadn't said a single word. She pushed the newspaper away. "That $15,000, she said softly, not looking at me. "I needed it. I was broke. I couldn't have closed on the house without it. My job, it's not what you think it is. My house. I can barely make the payments. I have $20,000 in credit card debt just from furnishing it." She finally looked up, and her eyes were full of a new, raw emotion. It wasn't jealousy. It was awe. "You were building real things," she said. "You were building assets. You were building a business. I was just showing off. I was just buying stuff to put on Instagram." She took a shaky breath. Are you really rich?" "No, Chloe," I said. "I'm not rich. I'm just secure. All my money is in the buildings. I still live in my same apartment." The room was silent again. For 28 years, the power had always been on their side of the table. It was in my father's booming voice, my mother's anxious fretting, and Chloe's bright spotlight. Now, the power was just sitting in the middle of the table. It was in the truth. I looked at my broken, blind, sorry family. The anger I had held onto for so long, it was gone. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt light. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to prove anything. They had finally looked. And they had finally seen me. The weeks after that dinner were a new kind of quiet, an awkward, careful quiet. My mother started calling me, not to tell me about Chloe's latest drama, but to ask about me. How was your day, Becca? She'd ask. Are you working on one of your houses? Yes, Mom, I'd say. I'm tiling a kitchen today. Oh, she'd say. That's wonderful. Be careful. It was a start. My father texted me one day. I was looking at my property tax bill. It seems high. Do you know anything about appealing that? It was his way of saying, I respect you. I see you as an expert. I texted him back the information he needed. Chloe was the most silent. But one night, she sent me a text. Can I take you to coffee? I want to ask you about budgets. I wrote back, I'd like that. A few weeks later, I closed on my 5th property. It was a small 2-bedroom house, my easiest closing yet. I had saved the 20% down payment entirely from the profits of the other 4 properties. The machine was working perfectly. I went to the house that evening. The new tenants weren't moving in for a week. I stood in the empty living room. The sun was setting, and the light was pouring through the windows, catching on the dust motes dancing in the air. It was beautiful. I took out my phone. I took a picture of the keys in my hand with the golden sunset light in the background, and I did something I had never done before. I opened my personal social media account, not my business one. Mine. I posted the picture, and I wrote a caption. I thought about what to say. I could have been angry. I could have said, look at me now. But I didn't feel that. I just wrote the truth. Caption. Started with nothing but a dream and a savings account. No shortcuts, no permission, just work. I posted it. It was the first time I had ever publicly claimed my success. I put my phone in my pocket and just enjoyed the quiet moment. A few minutes later, it buzzed. It was a comment from my mother. Mom, so proud of you, sweetheart. Always have been, even when I didn't show it right. I read the comment. Always have been. It was a lie, of course. She hadn't been. She hadn't seen me. But it was also her truth now. It was the truth she needed to believe. It was the best she could do. And as I stood there in that empty house that I owned, I started to cry. I slid down the wall and just sat on the floor and wept, not for the pain, not for the past. I cried because it was over. The long 28-year fight to be seen, it was just done. It was a cry of pure, absolute release. I was still sitting there when Liam called. He must have seen the post. Hey, you, he said, his voice warm and kind. How does it feel? The new house. It feels good, I whispered, my voice thick from crying. I saw your mom's comment, he said gently. Yeah. Are you okay? Yeah, I said, wiping my face. I cried. Good, he said. You deserve to. You know, he said, I was thinking about it today. You realize you've become the person you needed when you were 22? His words hit me so hard I stopped breathing for a second. My 22-year-old self. The girl eating instant noodles. The girl who was so lonely, so desperate for just one person to see her, to believe in her. The girl who would go to the basement to look at a blue ribbon. And I had done it. I had saved her. I had become her hero. "Yeah," I whispered. "I guess I did." He was quiet for a second. "And Becca?" "Quiet doesn't mean small." "No," I said. "On you, it just means strong." We hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I got in my car. I didn't go to my cheap apartment. I didn't go to Liam's. I drove to Elm Street. I parked across the street from my first duplex, my first ugly, beautiful building. The paint was still peeling. The porch light was still on. I could see the blue glow of Elena's TV in her window. She was safe. She was warm. Because of me. This building. This was my $15,000. This was my private design school. This was my instinct. My father was wrong. I wasn't handy. I was great with my hands. And I was great with my mind. I looked at that peeling yellow paint, and I smiled. A real one, this time. I didn't need their applause anymore. I didn't even, I realized, need their apologies. The work was enough. The numbers were enough. I was enough. The forgotten daughter was gone. She had packed her bags and left that Sunday night at the dining room table. The woman who was left, the woman who built an entire empire in silence, had finally been seen. And the best part, I thought, as I started my car and drove toward my future, was that she had finally seen herself